Hello friends, my name is Marines and today I have a review of Borne by VanderMeer. This book first got on my radar because of Tom from SFF 180. He picked this as his favorite book in my last favorite books of the year collab. This is an adult science fiction story that centers around a woman named Rachel who is a scavenger in an unnamed city ruined by this entity that we just know as the company. The company experimented on and created biotech, so this is technology that has aspects of biology, so either part tech, part animal, or part tech, part human. In their experimentation, they created a creature called Borne, and he is a giant flying bear and just kind of flies around causing chaos, and he's also so large that things get like caught in his fur, and part of what Rachel does as a scavenger is that she goes through his fur while he's sleeping and sees what kinds of things are there. During one of her outings scavenging on Borne, she finds this thing that she doesn't know entirely what it is, and kind of looks like a sea anemone. She might think it's a plant, but she decides to take it home. She's immediately taken with it and she decides to bring it home with her. This thing that we discover what it is alongside Rachel brings a layer of complication to her life, especially as it exists with her partner Wick. This book was extremely strange, but in a way that I found enjoyable. It is a little bit jarring first as you begin to read about this unnamed city overrun with things that are animal-like people or people-like animals, and it's topped off with this giant flying bear. You soon settle into the story though, and speaking about it almost doesn't do it justice, because you talk about like this giant bear and it seems like such a wild thing, but in the context of the story it makes so much sense after a while. And I really found that my favorite part of the story was that introduction, as you're getting to know the pieces of the story and you really find yourself settling into this world as it exists for our main character. A big portion of the story is Rachel figuring out what this creature, which she names Borne, is, and the motherly affection that she develops for it. And in the background of that is this partnership that she has with Wick, and they're partners on several levels. So a big theme of the story really is this family, and I love stories about found families. I think the story was working best for me when it was really exploring their relationships and the connections between them. Without getting too much into Borne as an entity in the story, there are some things that happen, some ways that Borne messes up, I would say, and it really brings up this theme of Rachel's feelings for this creature and what it means to kind of mitigate those feelings with the things that she knows are right and wrong. The story is also set up against a background where we're invited to think about humanity. We talk about in so many words throughout the story what it means to be a person and nature versus nurture, but also this concept of humanity as it pertains to this nefarious and nebulous entity of the company and the actions that they took that led to the ruin of a city, and that the consequences, the people of the city are still living with the consequences of their inhumanity. I love strange books. I did a whole video about strange books and weird books and kind of what that consists of, and some of the ones that I really enjoyed and some of the ones that I didn't, so I'll link that up on the screen. But I love when books that are out of the ordinary invite you to look at deeper themes, and I think that was definitely what was happening here. And there were moments throughout the story where something out in the larger world was happening, and there was almost a direct mirror in something happening in the smaller setting of the balcony cliffs where Rachel and Wick and Borne were living. The chaos of the city is really personified in this giant flying bear. This idea of humanity is kind of ping-pong back and forth through the different creatures that live in there, and then the other main villain, which is the magician, who is a woman living in the city who is also experimenting on children and modifying children. So you get a lot of different aspects of that question of what makes a person, but also good and bad and right and wrong and evil. The downside of this entire story for me was definitely the pacing. As I mentioned before, I loved the beginning of the story, but as you get into the middle chunk, there is so much repetition that is really trying to seek the establishment of these characters, but unfortunately it starts to get into a rhythm of Rachel's interactions with Borne and her arguments with Wick in a way that I thought was incredibly repetitive and really dragged down the pacing of the story. It took me a couple of months to read this because as soon as I got to the middle, there was really no pull for me to pick it back up because we were just falling into this monotone. And then to add to the problem, as we get into the ending of the story, the pace really picks up in a dramatic way, and the ending all happens so quickly that I wasn't even sure what happened at the end, like I almost had to go back and reread certain things, and then I ended up reading like a plot summary to make sure that I truly understood everything that happened, because it happened so quickly after such a lag that it almost left me a little bit breathless, and I was kind of like, okay, where are we? That uneven pacing was a huge downfall for me in this story. It took this book that I thought I was going to love, as we got the introduction to this super weird world, and I realized that there was this theme of humanity and found families. I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing, definite 5-star. And then that whole middle portion and the way we zipped through the end really demoted the book for me. But then after I finished reading it, that I had all of those conflicted feelings, I did find that I was still thinking about the book a lot. All of this makes this a very strange book to rate and recommend. You do get incredibly immersed in this story, and I got very invested in the characters. I think it's a good story for anybody who wants to experience something that is very unusual, at least in setting and in premise. I think you just have to be okay with knowing that you might just have to pull yourself through the middle portion of that story. Overall, I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. If you've read or want to read this book, I would love to chat about it with you down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. Who is a scavenger in an unnamed ruins? Who is a scavenger